It's a photograph of my parents on the day they first met. They stand on the Gibara Bridge, their backs against new concrete, and behind them, the Gibara River lies like a ribbon along the valley, from Lochbarra through Duhry, flowing between low hills painted against the backdrop of the Derryveigh Mountains. My mother is 30 years old, my father 2 years older. They stand together, shoulders not quite touching. My mother wears a knee length coat, and in the black and white photo, it is light coloured and fastened with large translucent buttons. She is smiling, looks almost serene, but I can see that she's not at ease. My father wears a suit and he leans back against the bridge, arms crossed, looking relaxed, handsome. Something shimmers in his left lapel, most likely his pioneer pin. His gaze is direct, a crooked half smile, and I feel his fierce blue eyes look at me. It is a Thursday. My mother, Kathleen, has been at home in Creasla all week preparing for her wedding on Friday. But the previous morning, her sister Sue, the prospective bridesmaid, heard her crying in bed. The bridegroom and her fiance of 10 years had begun drinking again. My mother didn't know how to call the wedding off. Sue didn't listen to her pleas not to tell their mother. Better the Wednesday before than the Wednesday after, Granny said, not pausing from the milking. But she insisted that my mother relay the news to the invited guest herself. So on Thursday, Sue and her fiance Gus drove my mother to the houses of relatives and friends. Later in the day, because they were close by and because my mother was distraught, Gus suggested that as a diversion they call on his brother Dominic, who on his recent promotion to sergeant had been transferred from Cork to Duhry. So my father, always ready for an excursion, joined them, and on the Gibara Bridge they stopped to take photographs. When they looked at the camera that day, my parents didn't know they would be married within a year, that the first of their 11 children would be born 9 months after their wedding. They didn't know that they would move to many different towns, that they would leave behind two babies in unmarked graves. They didn't know yet the pattern of car trips over so many years that would build a repertoire of family songs: The West's Awake, The Holy City, Huff the Magic Dragon, an effort to unsuccessfully stave off car sickness. That day, they couldn't have imagined the world that was waiting for them, how the certainties of church and state would crumble in their lifetimes, how they would deal with adult children emigrating, grandchildren conceived outside marriage, homosexuality, suicide. They didn't know that my father, an ardent teetotaler, would succumb to alcohol in his middle years and wrestle with it until the end. They couldn't foresee my mother's descent into dementia in her 80s, unable to remember anything except the words of the emigrant's letter, to which we faithfully joined in the chorus, "'Cause they're cutting the corn in Creasla the day." As they stood on the Gibara Bridge the day they met, my mother was someone entering her own power for a however brief period. My father knew he was in the presence of beauty, a feeling he held on to even after my mother was buried, and he wanted to join her. The last time I saw him, unable to walk or talk, but with full mental capacity, his eyes held the same piercing quality, shadowing his thoughts that ran like a river through bewilderment to anger to sadness. And when I searched for this photo, I couldn't have known that I would set aside all that history. I didn't know that my sadness and grief would dissipate in the evening mist over the Gibara. I didn't know that instead I would see my mother smile on a country road in springtime as she inhaled the first primrose's delicate scent. That I would see the arc of her arm as she scattered grain like confetti to feed the chickens she finally managed to acquire in our small town garden. That I would see my father sitting at his mother's untunable piano that they brought with them to every house we lived in, playing his flourishing rendition of the Maiden's Prayer. But mostly, I didn't expect the sudden intense recollection of how their eyes sparkled when they looked at each other, or that I would see them chatting and laughing, easy and relaxed, with relatives, friends, strangers, and remember how we children eavesdropped on stories that suggested our parents were so much more than we would ever know. In my mind, my parents still stand together on the Debarra Bridge, their backs to the mountains, facing the widening estuary where the river drifts through golden sand towards the setting sun. My mother's eyes dance. I hear her soft voice. My father's mantra was that everyone should have a party piece, and now he sings his, laughing at my mother's modest protestations. His vivid eyes sparkle while her brown eyes glow. I hear his voice wavering across the bridge, across time, notes rising and falling with the ebb and flow of the tide. Oh, I will take you back, Kathleen, to where your heart will feel no pain. And when the fields are fresh and green, I'll take you to your home again.
Oh my goodness. Oh, what I say, Bridge, you make me want to cry. That was beautiful. That was so, so beautiful. And that is like, it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous photograph. It's so touching, really, really is. Thank you so much. What a wonderful tribute to your parents, really bringing them to life, flaws and all, which I think is how we should remember people, especially our parents. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I was surprised how writing the piece I worked. The flaws are generally what can stay in your mind. What you remember. But I went through that, went to happier times. So it was very interesting
Do,
experience.